What's up, you guys? Sean Ross Sapp, managing editor, Fightful.com, FightfulMMA.com. It's where you can go to get your latest MMA news, videos, photos, podcasts. We have one this Saturday after UFC 229, a huge day in MMA and pro wrestling. Make sure you all check us out. I've been posting individual fight reviews up there from those podcasts. Check those out. Give us a thumbs up, subscribe, all that good stuff. You know the drill, FightfulSelect.com. That's where you can get good bonus content. Go check us out. It's our additional subscription service. But it's UFC 229 week, and we don't have a lot of time for plugs. We got James Lynch joining us. James, how are you?
I'm doing well, guys. Good to be back.
In the new home as well.
That's right. Yeah, still getting stuff figured out. My furniture still isn't here yet, so I'm still living out of a suitcase. But we hear Thursday, but it'll basically come when I'm not here because I'll be in Vegas tomorrow to cover UFC 229.
Showdown Joe is joining us, fresh out of a typhoon.
Yeah, that was a little scary. That was
how was that?
Well, that's my second typhoon that I've been in Japan, and you can add an earthquake a few shows ago. So every time I seem to go there, there's some crazy Mother Nature thing going on. But I mean, I'll be honest with you, it didn't really affect us at all because inside Saitama, there was a typhoon going on outside. But other than that, we were fine. And then the typhoon that really hit was in Tokyo. So we were in Saitama. And then by the time we got back to Tokyo, it had already sort of passed, except for the second bus. We got on the first bus. Trig, Jill, and I, and a bunch of fighters got on that first bus because if you don't get on that first bus, you're there for a long time. The second bus left at about an hour and a half after the first bus. And that one got hit with some of the remnants of the typhoon. It was being bounced around off the highway. We had no problem. We got back. Got to the hotel, and it was getting pretty windy, and I just sat inside, up to my room. See ya.
We are going to talk about Rizin later on. But instead of typhoons, we're going to talk about shitstorms. The UFC shitstorm that is surrounding UFC 230. Dana White has told ESPN's Brett Okamoto that the main event of UFC 230 is a done deal, Joe. What do you think it is? Because Joe doesn't know. I made sure Joe didn't know before we got on the air.
UFC 230?
Yes.
That's in New York?
In a month, yeah.
I don't know. John Jones?
Valentina Shevchenko taking on Sijara Eubanks for the vacant flyweight championship. Yes, they sacrificed Shevchenko versus Joanna for this title in order to make this fight the main event of UFC 230 to not institute a new 165-pound division as Dustin Poirier and Nate Diaz had requested and obviously were pushing for. Joe, your thoughts on this main event, which Brett Okamoto is told that the bout agreements have not officially been signed.
Time. That is silly. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, we talked last week about the importance of fights that are relevant and what's the money fight. What's the big fight in that division? And it's not, with all due respect to you, Jar, don't get me wrong, but that is not the money fight in that division. And if you were to put a 165-pound title, introduce a new division, new champion, my goodness, you could promote that left, right, and center everywhere. Stranger things have happened in the UFC, but that doesn't make sense to me.
James, we talked on previous shows about UFC 230. Nate Diaz and Dustin Poirier gave them a pretty easy out by just saying, we'll do 5 rounds, we'll do 165. This division needs to happen anyway. What are they thinking?
I just don't get why you have to have a title fight on a pay-per-view. That to me is the issue here. It doesn't matter. To me, the fight that everyone's looking forward to is Diaz and Poirier. This is intriguing. Nothing to take away from the ladies. I mean, that is going to be a great fight as well. But Sijara Eubanks is coming off a decision win over Lauren Murphy. Like, it's not like she came out and, got a first-round finish or there's some sort of hype behind her heading into this fight. I mean, she was she was rightfully the one who people figured was going to win the show. Of course, she misses weight and, comes back, ends up getting that win over Murphy. But this, first of all, let's just take away the fact that Diaz and Poirier aren't the main event. Let's just look at this fight on itself. Like, who knows Sijara Eubanks? Valentina, sure. I mean, she's headlined, a couple cards and she's, fought for titles and things like that. But I just think the casual fan, if you're going to buy this pay-per-view, do you know who Sijara Eubanks is? I don't think you do.
No, not at all. I mean, you got 4 or 5 fights down the show and they're bigger names. Weidman versus Rockhold. Brunson versus Adesanya. More people know who Adesanya is at this point than Sijara Eubanks, I would argue. You have Souza and Branch, and my God, it's just such a bad move, such a tone-deaf move, in my opinion. And whether or not they make Poirier Diaz for the 165-pound title, that is something that needs to happen. We talked it to death. It just makes sense to do. But the UFC it seems like they're cutting off their nose to spite their face. If UFC were to put up a poll right now on their page, would you like to see a 165-pound division in the UFC? I wonder how that would go. Personally, hey guys, I'm going to start one of my own. We'll see what the audience wants. We'll see how that reacts, or how the reaction is to that. That's just unbelievably tone deaf. But we had some stuff happen this weekend that maybe wasn't as tone deaf. Gegard Mousasi, Rory McDonald, on paper, a much better fight than it ended up being. Joe, we didn't get your thoughts on this fight. What'd you think?
Yeah, that's a good way of summarizing it. Much better on paper than it was an actual fight. I mean, who would have thought the bigger guy was going to be faster, more precise, quicker? We saw that he was more powerful. That was just relentless. But yeah, I mean, Rory said that he checked out. He was frozen. He froze before he got in there. He wasn't mentally there. I mean, that's the last thing you want to hear from a fighter in a world title fight, especially with the opportunity of becoming a 2-division champion. You know, Gegard put on a fantastic performance, you know, and just was mean. That jab was fantastic. Even the right hand was fantastic. So good for him. Good for Gegard. You know, we'll see where they go with him now. But other than that, you know, Rory can go back to 170 and defend his title.
Also, we saw Rampage Jackson take on Wanderlei Silva. The way that I put it on the show is they looked like two dads fighting in a swimming pool. But Rampage Jackson won, even up the series. Both seem interested in fighting again. But Rampage, I think it was a big mental block for him to know that Wanderlei had the edge up on him. Do you think we see this fight again, Joe? And what do you think of the fight?
I think we do see it again. The fight was, you know, again, you described it pretty good. It was not the fight that we saw in Pride back in the day. These guys are older, so I wouldn't say dad bods, but you know, they're not the same fighters they were before. So it was, you know, you should have expected that heading into this bout here. That Wanderlei simply is not the axe murderer anymore. Now he's Wanderlei Silva. He's not the axe murderer anymore. If he was the axe murderer, we'd have seen a different fighter. You know,
he's the axe aggravated assaulter. We'll give him that much credit.
Yeah, it's just, you know, I think we all opine to see the old Wanderlei Silva. It ain't going to happen. Rampage, this is the fight that he wants. This is the fight he likes. This is the type of opponent he absolutely adores, a guy that's going to stand and bang with him. And, you know, unfortunately, it's a guy that's a shell of who he was. So, you know, I'd love to see Wanderlei do better, but he's not, at this point here, we've seen in the last couple of fights who Wanderlei Silva is as a fighter. He's not the same guy he was before in his youth. Still, you know, kick our butts, but other than that, he's not the same fighter.
We're starting to see more of what Aaron Pico is as a fighter. He was looking very good the other night, Joe. What did you take away from that performance?
It's the same thing I told Trig while we were out in Japan, in Tokyo. I said the conversation that we all had last week. What is it that Bellator knows that we don't know? And clearly we saw it, right? I mean, the guy's fantastic. The guy's fantastic. So, you know, a lot of bright things in terms of his future, but I thought it was going to be a longer fight. I thought it was actually going to go at least into the third round, at least go the distance. And, man, good for him.
Well, let's talk about your Rizin experience. James, did you get a chance to check out any of the Rizin show this weekend?
Yeah, I did catch the highlights. The guy I was really impressed with was Darren Cruikshank, again, getting another win here. I think it's 4 straight wins for him for the first time since I think it was October 2011. So getting the job done here, just a highlight reel machine. Just a good card overall. I mean, Rizin puts on some really great cards, and it's good to see them, you know, keep the momentum going from card to card. Crocop getting a win. I mean, it's what can you not like about that card?
I loved how it started almost, well, not right after Bellator ended, but shortly after Bellator ended. So you get to ride that wave of just MMA all night long. You had good fights on Bellator. You had big names on Rizin. Joe, I don't know if you can confirm or deny. Did you all get any Peppa Pig action on Rizin?
No. That's what I'm aware of. We did not.
Well, that's a shame because Bellator brought home the bacon in the UK.
Oh, here we go.
I don't know if you heard about this, but Peppa Pig aired at 6 a.m. local time in the UK. They don't get a lot of these shows live. James and I talked about this a little bit, but it was deemed Bellator was deemed not suitable for morning viewing in the UK on a Viacom-owned station. Now, keep in mind, Joe, they're running this event on DAZN, 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 which I saw a commercial for during football this week where they make fun of the pronunciation of their own name.
Oh,
so
really?
At least they're aware. But they're running this on a streaming service. They can pace it how they want. They didn't need 6 fights. They didn't need 2 5-round scheduled fights. But still, it went incredibly over time. Joe, how do they make an error like this?
When I first saw that, I just said to myself, "You've got to be kidding me! Like, there has to be a different way to figure this out." But yeah, the running joke with the whole Peppa Pig thing is it's, I wouldn't say it's insane, but it's close to insane. Like, it's ludicrous to see that kind of stuff. But a lot of countries have different, rules and in terms of how they present product to a national audience. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with what's happening in the UK. Like, there's times, James knows the radio stations we have here in Toronto, and there's times that I'll be driving down, it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon, whether I've got it on sports talk radio or I've got it on an all hit station with my son in the back. And they're dropping the ass word or the shit word. I'm like, for real? Like, right now? And then my son's in the back. That guy's an ass. That guy's a piece of shit. I'm like, well, and then people say, oh, it comes from the parents. Well, no, it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Some radio host decides to say that. So I get sometimes while there's some networks or there's some countries in the world that kind of want to make sure that you're careful with what you say, but what you see is a different story. You can I've got the right to turn my radio station. If I see fights at 6 a.m. and I find it offensive, turn the channel. Turn the freaking channel. Don't bitch and complain. Turn the channel.
One of the top stories of the Rizin show, James, was Bob Sapp, who is 3-32 since like 09 across kickboxing and MMA. One of those is a TKO via injury, in which he was probably supposed to throw a fight, and the guy ended up getting hurt. Don't know, didn't watch it. But I did watch his win on Sunday. James, your thoughts on Bob Sapp back in the game and Rizin? He's a name.
Yeah, he beat a guy who's making his pro debut, is he not?
Yep.
Yeah. So
I mean, that's
the matchmaking for you. You're going to get good for Bob Sapp. Still going strong. How old is he now? 46.
Oh, 46. Is he really?
Yeah. Yes.
See, that's mind-boggling for me to even think, because I remember when he appeared on WCW programming, they were going to bring him in, and eventually he became a successful pro wrestler in Japan too, won the IWGP Heavyweight Championship. But I remember back then he was like a 26, 27-year-old. So that's quite humbling to me. Joe, your thoughts as you watched on and you called this fight?
It was a fun fight to call. I mean, Josh Barnett in the pre-fight interview said it best. If Osuna Rashi gets on top or Bob Sapp gets on top, fight's over. The first guy to land a big punch, fight's over. Well, the beginning of the fight, Osuna Rashi comes in there and starts blasting Bob Sapp, and the thought most people have is when that happens to Bob Sapp, he quote unquote throws fights, he's going to go down and stuff like that. He chose not to go down. He chose to sit there, bite down his mouthpiece, take it, and try and return the favor. In the second round, Osuna Rashi gets the takedown, and Sapp is able to reverse it, and he gets on top of Osuna Rashi. And I figured, okay, this is it. He's going to pound away. He wasn't able to do it. And in the third round, with his opponent basically out cold, standing up, Bob didn't have the energy to move forward and throw punches to knock him out. So, yeah, I mean, so some guy took a shot at me on Twitter saying, because I said, I've never seen this before in my life. And he's like, he brought up Kimbo and Data 3,000, 5,000, 4,000, whatever it is. And I was like, no, it's a little different there, bud, but I understand what you're saying.
So not a lot of stock being put into Bob Sapp's win, but Mirko Crocop's riding a 9-fight winning streak. However, maybe not fighting the top competition, but his opponent in Martinez was 11-3 going into this fight. James, I think he's 9-1 in his last 10 MMA fights. He's something like 16-2 since the last time he left the UFC, I think, or maybe the second time he left the UFC. How much stock are you putting in a Mirko Crocop win? It's good to see him still fighting because he was going to retire like 6-7 years ago.
Yeah, he's 44 years old now. It's good to see him get this win. Where does it lead him after this? I don't know. I think he'll continue to fight for Rizin. I know there's been some talk about him potentially going over to Bellator, but I don't know. I don't know if they want to go that route. I think Mirko's fine just fighting, with the schedule that Rizin has, and sort of just pick up a paycheck. Good for him though. It's kind of he was a guy that the UFC brought in expecting all this hype and he was going to win the title, and it didn't happen. And now he's still riding off into the sunset in Japan. It's great.
Making those six-figure paydays too. That's got to be nice. Not having to worry about some of the things that he had to worry about before. And he's finishing people. He's getting in there. They're putting him against guys, and he's finishing people. And that's what you want when you tune into a Mirko Crocop fight. You don't want to see the type of fight that he had with Frank Mir, even though that fight got finished. It was a all-time terrible fight before that. You don't want to, and you don't want to see him get finished is the thing. But they're able to make it work. I wouldn't be surprised if Rizin tried to yank Gabriel Gonzaga out of retirement one day. He did, I believe he did retire. But what do you see in the future for Mirko Crocop? Just more set him up, knock him down, Joe?
I think he's chasing down that Roy Nelson fight, to be honest with you. I see the same thing. I mean, in Roque Martinez, this is a guy that's got stamina for days. You may not see it in his body, but his opponent at Rizin is a kid that's just got it. Like, he's got it. He can fight. And he had Mirko in the corner, and Mirko just hit him with that elbow and split him open. Martinez's corner was upset because, it's a small cut. Dude was bleeding pretty bad. But Roque, man, that guy there is just the funniest dude ever. His whole team is fantastic. Everybody that surrounds him. But in terms of Mirko, I think he's chasing down something with that Roy Nelson fight. I know he really wants to fight Fedor. But the big thing with Rizin is Yuri Prochazka. That's the guy. I mean, people are they need to start paying attention to Yuri Prochazka as an opponent. Again, he emerged victorious at Rizin, again, taking out Jake Hewen, at 4 minutes and 29 seconds of the opening round. Mirko did say in an interview with Frank and I a while back that if I'm going to fight my retirement fight, it's got to be against Fedor or it's got to be against an up-and-comer. Well, Roque Martinez was an up-and-comer, and he beat him. So that's not going to be his retirement fight. But a lot of promotion, a lot of talk, a lot of chatter in Japan is Yuri Prochazka against Mirko Filipovic. So we'll see.
What else stood out to you on this Rizin show, Joe?
Oh, my God, the entrance for Andy Wynn. Did you guys see it?
I did.
Yeah.
I was in. So before we always get to the arena like 2.5 hours beforehand, right? It's just the way it is. The fighters got to be there. We're on the butts of the fighters, and there's Lenny Hart, and she's doing they're doing the pre-production stuff and going through everybody's entrance, and all of a sudden, I got to tell you guys, the sound in that arena is so crystal clear, like it's so beautiful, and then the production is incredible, and then I got to see basically what Andy was going to come into, right? So it was the Michael Jackson song, and I saw the graphic at the top and how amazing the editing was. And then I looked over on her, and boom, her Twitter comes up, and she's like, just for people that don't know, I'll be fighting tonight. Fight's been moved. People are probably going to laugh thinking I spent more time on my entrance than I did training for my fight. I'm like, oh, what are we in for? And man, that entrance was just freaking awesome. Absolutely amazing. Good for her. The one thing I did like, obviously, was Cruikshank's victory over Brandao. That was just ridiculous. But I want people on the live chat now, you two guys, and everyone to start paying close attention to the Asakura brothers. Kai and Mikuru, those guys, man, their story is ridiculous. They showed in both of their entrances home footage of these two gong shows fighting in front of their house when they were kids. They would put gloves on, a la BJ Penn back in the day, and they would fight each other. And I'm telling you, Sean and James, the footage was better than some of the fights we've seen professionally. And this is when they were kids. These guys are born, bred fighters. They fought for an organization called the Outsiders in Japan. The Outsiders is basically street kids, where the promoter brings in street kids, puts them in martial arts gyms, MMA gyms, and tells them to stop fighting on the streets, get paid to fight, train, and then we'll put you in the cage to fight. And that's how they came up through. And you see these guys, they're pretty boys. They're handsome-looking fellas. Man, can they throw bombs.
Another piece of news that kind of went under the radar over the last week and bummed me out, but I understand why it happened. Former UFC title challenger Michael Mayday McDonald has retired from MMA. He is 27 years old. And to an outsider, you may ask, why? Why is this? Well, it's been a talking point on our podcast for virtually the 2 years that it has existed. The guy can't stay healthy, most specifically in his hands. He's a woodworker. So if you can't use your hands as a woodworker, that's beyond threatening your MMA career, which has taken a back seat. It's threatening your livelihood in so many other different ways. And Joe, I even joked. I put betting odds, and I put him breaking his hand as a minus 400, I think it was. And it was a bit of a joke, but man, I was really disheartened and sad to see it. I love Michael McDonald. I love interviewing the guy. He's such just a wonderful, positive dude. Also, he had to overcome having that name. Imagine having that name and trying to make it for yourself, even in combat sports. Joe, what are your memories of Michael McDonald?
Oh, best memories when he was in Toronto, doing a bunch of stuff, doing a bunch of promotional stuff, and got to know him. We got to hang out. I think James was at the Air Canada Center at the time, which is now got a different name, Scotiabank Arena or something.
Scotiabank Arena,
yeah. But back then it was the Air Canada Center. It was all part of one of the UFC events, and we just sat there and shot the breeze, and I'm like, this guy's so cool, down to earth, nothing. No attitude about him like some fighters that just walk around and they're rolling their eyes because they've got to do media stuff. And, we did a bunch of stuff with him for Sportsnet. And, I just kind of felt for the guy. Just like, what, I like this guy. I can't wait to see him fight. And such an exciting fighter. But, your hands keep breaking. And like you mentioned, he works with wood. That's his gig. You need your hands. So I feel terrible for the guy. I feel absolutely horrible because he was one of those guys that could have had a much more prolific career if his hands didn't break so much. And, if we made a couple different decisions in some of the fights. But I think it was the Lineker fight, if I'm not mistaken, where he decided to fight fire with fire. And that was a game changer for me. And that's one of the fights that ended up having him just leave the UFC and go to Bellator. But other than that, I mean, this is a stand-up guy and very unfortunate he's got to retire at such a young age.
I would be shocked if we didn't see him fight again at some point at that age. I would be surprised if somebody didn't offer him money because, I mean, there's a lot of time for another ACB to emerge and just be like, here's a lot of money. We'll make it worth your while. James, this was a guy who was near the top of the bantamweight division, even when he left the UFC, even after the back and forth. And you're not going to run into a lot of guys who are 27 years old and who had missed 2 years and then a year and a half of their career at that. But he's been fighting professionally since he was 16. What are your memories and maybe thoughts on Michael McDonald retiring?
Well, the memory that sticks out to me for sure is UFC 145 when he got that win over Miguel Torres. That was the fight that got him the fight against Renan Barão for the title. To me, this was a kid that would look like the future of the UFC in terms of, what he was able to accomplish in such a short period of time. You mentioned the hands. It happens. I mean, there's certain fighters, they get injuries. And especially for him who has a sort of a day job outside of this where, he's trying to make a living and everything else. The Kanehara fight was interesting because that was a fight he nearly lost and he ended up coming back. That was at UFC 195. But how about Bellator? I mean, it sucks for them in a way because this last fight, he just knocked out Eduardo Dantas, who, was their former champion. He finished him in the first round. It's like, you're not really getting the worth of that at this point because he has to retire. So just a great career from a guy. And I get it. When I saw him, I saw the headline that he had retired. I was like, it makes sense. So, I wish him all the best, but you got to think long-term. And I think he's making the right choice here.
Yeah, and the thing is, if he fights Barão tomorrow, well, not tomorrow. He's got his arms swollen up. If he fights him healthy, I think he beats Barão in probably under 2 rounds today. And you always have to wonder. You have to question that. I don't want to say inexperience of McDonald, but he was still very young at that point. And then some other factors. But McDonald announced, it was 4 days ago, and he said, quote, "I'm excited to announce the start of a new chapter for me and my wife, Rachel. Today, I'm officially retiring from MMA fighting, and I plan on never competing in martial arts competitions again. I had a wonderful career and wonderful staff, and even greater, a wonderful wife and a wonderful God to thank for all these great moments. I'm going to be doing my woodworking full-time from here on and many years to come. I've been a professional cabinet and furniture maker for 7 years now alongside my fighting. I have my own custom cabinetry and furniture shop and just as passionate about woodworking as I am martial arts," end quote. I've talked to him about this before. He was actually a guest on Wikipedia Fact Check because how am I going to interview Michael McDonald and not bring, you can't Wikipedia the guy. First off, you're going to run into musicians and comedians and other combat sports fighters. So he was a natural on that, and he was very, very just always down to earth and really happy and always positive, and he was really wholesome as well. I don't know if you all ever noticed just how wholesome the guy was. And as you mentioned, James beat Dudu Dantas in under a minute, and still he couldn't keep his hands healthy. And quite frankly, I don't blame him. If he's making a good living off of woodworking and it's something that he loves to do and he can channel all that, good. Selfishly, I hope we get to see him fight again. I feel like we were robbed of a lot of Michael McDonald fights, and that's a shame because he is an outstanding fighter, and best of luck to him. It's time, guys. UFC 229. All the focus is on Conor McGregor and Khabib, and we'll get to that. That'll be towards the end of the show. This is a damn good card. I like it. You got Ferguson Pettis, OSP Dom Reyes, Derek Lewis Volkov. You have Michelle Watterson and Herrig, Pettis and Formiga, Aspen Ladd, Tanya Evanger's a good fight. Gray Maynard in there at lightweight. I'm interested in that one. You have a bantamweight fight in the women's division, which always means something for better or for worse. But let's look at this Fight Pass prelim card. You have Alan Patrick against Scott Holtzman. You have Ryan LaFleur against Tony Martin. Anything about either one of those two really stand out to you, James? Alan Patrick has been in the UFC since 2013, but this is only his 7th fight.
Yeah, interesting matchup here because, Patrick has been fairly inactive, but Holtzman's the one who actually has the long layoff heading into this fight. I know he became a dad recently, so that's why he wanted to take some extra time off and facing a really tough guy in Alan Patrick. And to me, this is a good fight for both guys because, Patrick, he needs to stay active and, he over the years, he's just been very inconsistent. And I think he's a guy that's sort of been slept on. I mean, you look at his age a little bit, you wonder, how much longer he's going to sort of be kicking around here. He's 35 years old and, Holtzman, as the younger guy, trains at the lab. Holtzman, I mean, he's heading into this fight on a 2-fight win streak, but no real notable wins, and this would be sort of that notable win for him if he's able to pull it off. But I don't know, it's a tough one to call. I think if you had to make a pick, I'm going Alan Patrick in this one, just because of the fact I think that he's proven himself more in the UFC in terms of his skill set, and Holtzman's hot sauce has got a tough task ahead of him on Saturday.
As am I, and you look at the Ryan LaFleur Tony Martin fight, and usually you look at a guy who's 7-2 in the UFC, and you say, why is he on Fight Pass? Why is Tony Martin, who's won 4 of his last 5, on Fight Pass? Joe, I think it's quite obvious why Ryan LaFleur is on Fight Pass. He's not finishing fights. They don't want to shove him on the FS1 or the pay-per-view show that's going to have a lot of eyeballs on it if he's not going to deliver. So this is their way of giving him a good opponent in Tony Martin, and vice versa, because Tony Martin hasn't been finishing guys of late either, at least the way that he was when he came into the UFC. What do you think about that and the placement of it?
Well, I think you're bang on. I mean, since he's joined the UFC, he's only been a part of one fight that ended in a finish, and he lost that fight to Alex Oliveira. It was a knockout punch. So that's pretty much one of the only reasons why he's on this Fight Pass card. He's just not finishing people. And bottom line is, when it comes to the UFC, there's a lot of intangibles that go into promoting a fighter, promoting stars, promoting stuff in general. Number 1, you got to win. Number 2, you got to finish. Number 3, you better be good on the microphone. So, and Ryan LaFleur right now has a couple of X's in those columns. Great guy, just has to sell it more. He's got to sell it more, and he's got to finish guys.
James, the real question on my mind during this entire show is Nick Lentz finally going to call out Conor McGregor, who has been ducking him for years? I mean, I remember when Nick Lentz was the answer to Conor McGregor. People, can he get past Nick Lentz? But can he get past the test of Nick Lentz? He's taking on Gray Maynard, a former champion at lightweight. Maynard has a bit of a career resurgence, won 2 of his last 3 fights, but hasn't fought in a year and a half, or not a year and a half, about 14 months. Either way, he is a guy, UFC likes to give a longer leash to guys like Gray Maynard, who put on great fights for them and have competed for titles. And he was real close to that title at one point. But I always say, if you lose 4 fights in a row, there's something about you UFC likes. And even if he loses here, he's probably going to stick around until he decides to retire. But Lentz and Maynard at lightweight, who you got?
I got Lentz in this fight. Maynard's coming in on a layoff from this fight. I know I think he was building a house or something. He had to take some extended time off, and those wins that you mentioned, those were at featherweight. So him moving back up to 55, which I think is better. I mean, I don't know what the record is for fighters later in their career when they drop weight. It's not very good though. In general, a lot of the fighters don't do so well. So good on him for moving back up. But I just look at Lentz as the more complete fighter. Training at the, I was going to say the Black Zillions, but it's Hard Knocks now, training over there in Florida with some really great training partners there. He's getting looks when it comes to wrestling. He's training with Logan Storley. He's training with, a lot of really high level guys over there. Maynard's still at Extreme Couture, training with some good guys as well. But I just think overall on paper, I think at this point in their careers, I think Lentz is the better fighter, and I expect him to probably take a decision. And speaking of decision, one more thing I wanted to mention on the last fight between LaFleur and Martin. Tony Martin was told by Sean Shelby that him and LaFleur are the two most boring fighters in the UFC. I don't know if that was a way to say, to kind of light a fire into them, but Tony was not happy about that because if you remember a couple fights ago, he fought Johnny Case in what was a really entertaining matchup. So to hear that, kind of a shot in kind of a shot in the pants, so to speak. But yeah, so LaFleur and Martin, I think you're going to see a really explosive fight there because of the fact I think both of them were told they were boring. So imagine the match. Imagine your boss telling you, you're underperforming. That's basically what they said.
I hope we do because they need it. They really need it. Both of those guys do. We have a couple of tilts in the women's bantamweight division. Lena Landsberg, top 15 fighter who I will forever associate as cyborg victim. That's just the immediate thing that pops up into my head. Taking on Yana Kunitskaya. And we also have Aspen Ladd taking on Tanya Evinger. That Ladd-Evinger fight I am especially looking forward to. I think this is a great test for Aspen Ladd, who has wins over Sijara Eubanks, Lena Landsberg, even earlier in her career over Amanda Cooper. Joe, any fight in this division can lead to something because you just never know. And if you just happen to make weight on the right day, you might be slotted into a title fight given the way that things are now and the depth of these divisions, because you never know if anybody who's competing for a championship is going to make weight, if they're going to make it to weigh-ins. So as long as you keep on that winning path, you show up and you make weight, you might be the person that's called upon. Aspen Ladd might win this fight against Evinger. The next time she's there, she hits that 135 mark. Somebody doesn't show up to fight. Bam, she's in a title fight way earlier than she expected. What are you looking for out of these two women's fights?
With the Aspen Ladd fight, she's a minus 160 favorite right now. I'm looking for her to finish Tanya. Not going to be easy, but I'm looking for her to secure that finish because what you just said is bang on. You never know what can happen in this division. Just be ready. Be available. Get ready to step in on that scale. Be ready for that call. Say, you know what, we have a title fight here. We'd like you to show up on fight week. We'll fly you down, but you got to make weight just in case. So Aspen Ladd's a perfect candidate for that type of scenario, but first she's got to get past Tanya Evinger. In terms of the Landsberg-Kunitskaya fight, same thing with Kunitskaya. She needs to get a finish here, in my opinion. Lena Landsberg, she's lost to Aspen Ladd, right? So she's lost to Cyborg. So I don't know what to expect too much from her, but with Yana, I think she's got to get a finish as well, and this really opens up the division.
James, your thoughts?
Yes, sorry, I just didn't know if I should chime in there. Two quick things. Obviously, we have interviews with Ladd and Kunitskaya here on Fightful. Check those out. Kunitskaya training in Vegas now. She was at Jackson, so now she's getting to work at Extreme Couture with all the different fighters that go through there, especially with the PI. She's getting a lot of different looks. So interested to see how that pays dividends. And I agree with Joe here. I think she needs a finish to stay relevant coming off that loss to Cyborg. And with Ladd, one thing we didn't mention is that she missed weight against Leslie Smith. So there's always been sort of the stigma with her about weight issues. If you remember the year before that, she was supposed to fight Jessica I, had a medical issue, had to pull out of that fight as well. So Ladd needs to create some momentum here. And she's got a tough test in Tanya Evinger. I know the age is kind of scaring a lot of people off, and I think that's why Ladd is the favorite in this fight. But let's not forget some of the fighters that she has defeated, including Yana, talking about Tanya Evinger here. So I think, Ladd should probably win this fight. But from a betting perspective, I think the value here is actually on Evinger. And, Ladd, when I spoke to her, she knew about this fight well in advance, says the weight issues won't be a problem. But it is something to keep an eye on because she did miss weight in her last fight against Leslie Smith, like I mentioned. But my picks, Ladd, and I'm going to go Kunitskaya in those fights.
You got to believe that the UFC wants Ladd to win. 23-year-old undefeated prospect. That's probably the way that they want to go. Other lines on this show: LaFleur minus 160 over Tony Martin plus 130. Lentz minus 225 over Gray Maynard 170 plus 175. Alan Patrick minus 250 over Scott Holtzman plus 195. Yana Kunitskaya minus 190 with a plus 155 on Landsberg. That might be one of my I got 5 on it's right there. And Aspen Lab minus 140 with Tanya Evinger plus 110. You have Vicente Luque minus 700 over Jalen Turner at plus 450. When odds are that ridiculous, that might just be an I got 5 on it, even though I am completely leaning towards Vicente Luque here. What are your thoughts, James?
This is a stupid matchup. I don't get it. They did this exact same thing a month ago with Thiago Santos and Kevin Holland. They're putting a prospect against a veteran. This is what I think happened. I think they tried to find an opponent for Luque. They couldn't. So they got a guy who won on Contender Series in Jalen Turner, who should have been given a contract. He wasn't. So he takes a short notice fight. And here's the thing. Turner's moving up to 170 for this fight. He's a natural lightweight. So to me, that's why the line is so crazy. And Luque is extremely talented. Let's not forget Luque has a win over Bilal Muhammad. I mean, this guy is, he's got some quality wins. He just knocked out Chad Laprise. I mean, Luque is, in my opinion, definitely a top 15 guy, a guy that's, really, sort of established himself. His last loss was Leon Edwards. And he's facing a guy in Turner who is very talented. I became aware of Jalen Turner maybe 2 years ago. Brandon Gibson raves about this kid. I was just saying that, he's got all the tools to sort of take it to the next level. And we saw that on Contender Series. He got that win. I know it ended prematurely with the doctor stoppage, but Turner, extremely talented. But this is dumb because what the UFC is doing essentially, Turner's 23 years old, and you're getting him to face Luque. I'm pretty sure Luque is going to finish him in this fight. But why are you killing a prospect like that? It doesn't make any sense to me. This is stupid matchmaking. That's why the line's so high.
I agree completely with that. It is weird matchmaking, real weird matchmaking. Sean O'Malley has announced that he is not going to be competing in his fight. USADA has instituted a new policy where they don't announce failures or violations immediately. They wait for the due process to occur. But Sean O'Malley got ahead of this and announced it himself. I thought it was very mature of him, Joe, but I agree with this new policy, but at some point when people just disappear from cards or don't compete for 8, 9, 10 months, maybe a year and a half, people are going to start wondering. And there's a lot of trial and error with this method, but I want to know your thoughts on USADA's new policy as well as Sean O'Malley getting ahead of things.
Well, first things first, I'm ecstatic USADA watches our show because this is what we've talked about forever. Right? We said, stop announcing stuff until the final result is in. Stop. You're ruining careers. So I agree with it. We're now entering the next chapter of this USADA relationship with the UFC, or another chapter, another era, per se. The John Jones scenario. I mean, I thought it was crazy that Verdum came out and said, I was offered to snitch as well from USADA, and I didn't do it. Like, it's totally like this is crazy. I mean, no one could have predicted all this USADA stuff when it first came out. I mean, it was supposedly great for the sport, but now they're no longer announcing any results or anything until the due process is done. Perfect. Sean O'Malley coming out and doing what he did. Sometimes you want to get ahead of the curve when you're guilty. You understand what I'm saying? Sometimes you want to get ahead of the curve when you feel like something's about to go down. Right? Put out that fire before it gets really too big. I don't know what the deal is with O'Malley and what happened fully, but to your point, when you start thinking to yourself, man, this guy, this girl, whomever it is, hasn't competed in 9 months. Why aren't they on cards? They had a great victory. They're on a 4-fight win streak. We're going to start thinking right away, USADA.
Yeah, but I mean, we're less inclined to think that than if USADA just comes out and says, hey, this guy who's actually popped before, they did again. Don't give him the benefit of the doubt. James, what did you think of this? Personally, I thought it was a good step for O'Malley considering the new rule because he's going to have the reputation of the stoner. I mean, it's something that I literally watched Matt Riddle battle throughout his independent wrestling career because of the reputation he had. O'Malley didn't take long to establish that reputation as well. I thought this was a smart move on his behalf.
Yeah, and it's smart that he did do this, but you still see people on social media just assuming that's what it was. I saw a lot of people posting, oh, yeah, he got busted for weed again. It's like, no, guys, read what he said. Good on him. But like you said, they were going to find out anyways, because if he's off the card and what are you going to lie to us? It's like, it's one of those things. So I think he made the right choice. And, I should mention this as well. I tried to interview Sean O'Malley last week. He ends up canceling the day of. I'm like, what's going on here? And then, of course, this comes out later. So, wish him the best. Hope it all gets sorted out It seems like we're seeing a lot of weird stuff happening with USADA and everything else. So hopefully he gets rebooked. A bit of a blow to the card because I was looking forward to that fight, but nonetheless, good to see him get back. Or hopefully he gets everything sorted out.
Couple of guys on this show, Sergio Pettis and Jesse Formiga, two guys the UFC wants in title shot position. Formiga since the beginning, because when he came into the UFC, he was one of the top, were considered among the top flyweights in the world. You have Sergio Pettis for obvious reasons. He's a Pettis brother, and he's very good. This is a really, really great flyweight fight, especially for the Fox Sports 1 prelims, essentially, which likely will be bumped up to headline the Fox Sports 1 prelims. James, who you got here, and what do you think is in the future for the winner?
I like Pettis in this fight. I was really impressed what he did in his last matchup, getting that win. Against, I think it was Benavidez, right? Was his last fight. I always get the flyweights mixed up here and there. But yeah, I thought Pettis put on a good performance in that one. Formiga's been one of those guys who's just been there. He's been consistent. He's been close to a title shot. As far as the winner, I think they're going to have to wait because I still have this theory that I think we're going to see Henry Cejudo and TJ, take place. And then I think we'll see DJ fight after that. I think that's what's going to end up happening because people think that DJ has to have this rematch right away. He just had another kid. I think he's going to take some time off and he still will get that rematch. But I think they're going to end up doing TJ and Henry first. That's just my hunch. And so I think the winner will either have to wait it out or, fight someone else or fight someone else that's a top contender.
The demand or what little demand there is for Cejudo and TJ is just so weird to me. It's just, I don't get it. Joe, in this Pettis Formiga fight, who you got?
Pettis. I got Pettis this one here. I think it, if you want to break it down on a surface level, the age factor. I mean, Formiga's got the experience, but Pettis is young. He took out Benavidez, and Formiga's slowly but surely, I'll always love Formiga. I mean, the guy fought in Taki forever. He's just a fantastic fighter, but it's getting to the point, he beat Ben Nguyen in his last fight. I just think Pettis is on a different level right now. He's at a different tier. I think he brings a little bit more to this fight here, especially with the speed. But Pettis has that habit of counterfighting. So it could turn into a fight where it's like, dude, don't do that. You'll be in the third round before you know it. You're going to be a little bit, you'll be exhausted. Go in there for the finish. I think he can outstrike Formiga, and Formiga is just basically going to want to get Pettis down on the ground and go for the back, right? So all depends.
Michelle Waterson against Felice Herrig. This is a nice fight to kick off the pay-per-view. Herrig, a minus 135 favorite to Michelle Waterson's plus 105. I am going for her in this one. I think she's a little too strong for Michelle Waterson. Waterson has been, there is a blueprint, a really good blueprint on beating her. And we've seen it implemented several times. Herrig has won 4 of her last 5, lost to Kowalkiewicz last time, and she went to a split with one of the top women in the division, contrary to what happened to her most recently. But, Joe, am I alone in this? What are your takes on Waterson and Herrig?
I think you summed it up very well. I mean, the blueprint's there to beat Michelle. The Karate Hottie is a fantastic fighter. I'll forever talk about the dexterity that she has in her limbs because she can do things that a lot of people can't do. But Felice Herrig has proven time and time again that this quote-unquote resurgence that she's having is showing a lot. And the fact that, like you said, she did go the distance with one of the division's best. Carolina did get knocked out last time, but Carolina's still a badass fighter. I just think that Herrig is going to control Waterson. She'll dictate where this fight is going to take place. As long as she keeps her chin down, keeps it in check, doesn't get tagged, I think Herrig wins this fight.
James?
Yeah, Herrig wins this fight. I think Waterson's one of those fighters, unfortunately, where her skill set can only get her so far. She's not a natural strawweight. I mean, if they had an atomweight division, I think she'd be a perfect fit there. Interesting, both these fighters have split wins over Courtney Casey, which I thought was kind of interesting. But yeah, Herrig will win a decision. I don't think we'll see anything groundbreaking here, but I think Herrig will do enough to get the win and just basically outmuscle Michelle Waterson over 3 rounds.
Atomweight division available in Rizin. So,
yeah,
come on over.
A possibly good heavyweight fight. Alexander Volkov favored at minus 175 over Derek Lewis plus 145. I'll put 5 on it for almost any heavyweight fight. Just why not? But you have Derek Lewis, who we have seen do great things, and then we've seen just look like the laziest fighter on earth. Like it is, and the thing is, he's won 8 of his last 9. So the inconsistency seems much larger than it actually is, but He just beat Francis Ngannou, technically. He beat Marcin Tybura. But Volkov, man, he's a guy that I look at, and I wasn't sure what was going to become of him after he lost to Johnson and Congo and Bellator. But he has become a legit contender in the UFC's top 10 heavyweight division, beating Struve, beating Verdum, beating Roy Nelson. James, who you got?
I got Volkov. I don't know why the line's so close on this. To me, it's fairly simple. Derek Lewis, his last performance, the reason it was so lackluster was his back issues, which he refuses to get, addressed. I don't know what he would need to do, but he's just not a very mobile heavyweight. And yes, he's got that knockout power, but November 2013 is the last time you would find Alexander Volkov losing by knockout. He's a guy that can take a punch. He's also got that reach and that length. I think Volkov dominates here. I could be completely wrong. It's heavyweight, like you said. Anything can happen. I mean, we've seen Lewis surprise before, but to me, I think we're going to see Volkov either finish or just pull out a decision here. But I really like Volkov in this fight. I think he dominates.
Lewis is deceptively large too. He looks like he's like the Mark Hunt 5'10", 5'11" heavyweight, but he's 6'3". He has a 79-inch reach. So even Alexander Volkov's 81-inch reach, it's not that much of an advantage, but I think he can use it a lot better. And he presses forward a little bit more, and I think that's a game that Derek Lewis doesn't want. Joe, what do you think?
I think the whole back issue with Derek Lewis, how it's fixed, it's not fixed, it feels better, doesn't feel better. That's causing a lot of issues with a lot of the line makers, as well as his last fight against Ngannou. In terms of Volkov, dude's a killer. I like the way he fights, man. You don't go and take out Attila Vey, Tim Johnson, Roy Nelson, Stefan Struve, and Fabricio Verdum if you don't have skills. And he's got cardio to take over Verdum in the 4th round, and before that, his last 3 fights went into the 3rd round or more. So the guys, I like Volkov. I think the line is somewhat fair, although I thought it'd be a bit further apart. I like Volkov in this fight.
Speaking of skills, odds makers think that Dom Reyes at -225 has the skills to beat an established light heavyweight in Ovin St. Preux at +175. I am inclined to agree. Agree. I really like Dom Reyes. I think that he is a light heavyweight that this division needs. He's a 9-0 prospect, essentially. All his fights in the UFC have ended in the 1st round. All but one have been finished. He's looking really good. And as I've mentioned, as John Jones mentioned on the Rogan podcast, he says that Ovin St. Preux can be one of the toughest guys to fight because despite his experience level, he can be so raw that he doesn't know what he's going to do next. So it's really hard for his opponent to know what he can do next. We do know that he has taken the Von Flue choke, which you got to put yourself in to a point to where it's not the type of submission that I just go off on all the time. If you leave that opening there for a fraction of a second, he's learned to pin that in. It's just not the same way that other people employ it, but he's won 4 of his last 5. I think Dom Reyes is going to get the win here, Joe, and that would be a big one for him in this division because Ovin St. Preux, for better or for worse, he beats the Tyson Pedros, the Corey Andersons, the Yushin Okamis of the world, Shogun Hua, Pat Cummins, a lot of guys, and Nikita Krylov, who are in and out, John Vellante, in and out of the top 15. So that would be a big win for Reyes, and I think he's going to get it done.
Yeah, it's going to be a good fight. I mean, Reyes is undefeated, still considered a prospect, obviously, but this is the test. This is the test the UFC wants to put him against because a guy in OSP, you just don't know. You just don't know what to expect, but what you do know is that OSP beats these types of guys, right? So if he doesn't beat this type of guy, then you know that the UFC is thinking, all right, Dominic Reyes is good. This guy, if you can't get past OSP, it's almost like a weird sort of gatekeeper position that OSP has right now. So this is one fight, guys, that I can't put my finger on who I think is going to win. This is one of those fights I just want to play out to see what it's all about because Reyes has that potential, but OSP just has the skill set. You just don't know, and he's very difficult to compete against. So I don't have a prediction per se on this one here, but I'll be definitely paying very close attention because the winner of this fight, especially if it's Reyes, is going to send havoc throughout this division.
That's a really good point, Joe, because with the exception of Ozdemir, you look back at the guys that have beaten OSP and Strikeforce in the UFC. It's Mousasi, it's Bader, Glover Teixeira, John Jones, Jimmy Manuwa, and even Ilir Latifi, he's not on the ascent or anything. He's been around for a while. James, I know that you talked to Dom Reyes. How do you see this fight going?
I like Dominic Reyes in this fight. I think one of the things we should mention is that his coach, Joe Stevenson, I remember him on The Ultimate Fighter. He is now the coach at Team Quest with Dan Henderson. So Reyes has actually been benefiting from this because he's over there getting to train with guys like Dan Henderson, Sam Alley. There's a guy, Jared Vandera, who fights for EFC as a light heavyweight fighter. So he's getting a lot of different looks in terms of bodies, which is great for this camp. My thing with this fight is, and Joe sort of alluded to it, I think OSP is the typical, he's the gatekeeper in this division. I mean, if you can beat OSP, you pretty much have solidified the fact that you're above, sort of the lower tier of that division. And I think Reyes is going to prove that in this fight. Now, it's hard because, none of his fights have, he hasn't had a single decision in the UFC. You have to go all the way back to 2015 for the last time he went the distance. So we haven't seen too much of a sample size in terms of him getting, going longer in a fight. But OSP, man, he's so inconsistent. That's my issue with him. I mean, even the Pedro fight, he ended up getting, he ended up getting the submission in that one. But leading up to that, he wasn't looking so hot. So to me, I think Reyes is going to be too fast, too quick, and I think he's going to end up either catching OSP or he'll just win a decision in this one. But there's no way at this point in his career that I can confidently pick Ovince St. Preux in this fight. So I'll go Dominic Reyes.
Co-main event, Tony Ferguson minus 360 over former UFC champion Anthony Pettis at plus 270. Tony Ferguson is a freak of nature, and he is recovering from a pretty bad knee injury, but it's his first fight in a year. He is a very unique, special fighter. This is probably going to be a very, very good fight. What kind of chances are you giving Pettis here, James?
It's tough. The only chance I give Pettis is the sense that he probably didn't deserve this fight. And I think we would all agree here, if he wasn't a former champion, he probably doesn't get this fight. I think it was just a good circumstance that he got that. So really, I mean, and the odds makers are showing it too, just with how much of an underdog he is. That's a scary thing. Pettis really doesn't have anything to lose. I don't think a lot of people are expecting him to win this fight. Ferguson, he was the interim champ. He got that stripped. He's been off for a year. I mean, the pressure's on him to win. I mean, he's got basically a payday against either, Conor McGregor or whoever, or Nate Diaz. It doesn't matter. There's a lot of good options for him or for anyone of the winner of this fight. So that's a scary thing here. Now, if I've been impressed with Pettis over his last couple of fights, I haven't. I think a lot of people put too much stock into the Chiesa win. Chiesa missed weight for that fight. Chiesa's fighting at 170 now. That was more indication of Chiesa not being at the top of his game than Pettis' performance, in my opinion. And if you want to go back even further than that, look at the Jim Miller win. He got a decision in that fight, but in my opinion, that wasn't the type of performance that tells me that Anthony Pettis is back. It was a good performance. He got it done. But if you went out there and finished Jim Miller, and I know Jim Miller's a tough guy to finish, I would, be a little bit more, I would think this fight would be a little bit more competitive. But I think Ferguson beats him in every area. I think he's a better striker, better ground guy. To me, I think the line is right where it needs to be. I see Ferguson either finishing Pettis or getting a dominant decision here. But the only thing that worries me is the fact that Pettis has this mentality coming into the fight where probably didn't think he was going to get this fight. A lot of people are expecting him not to win. That's a scary thing for a guy like this. So, I'll go Ferguson, but I wouldn't bet on this fight just because I think there is, sort of an X factor there with Pettis and the mentality he could have heading into this fight.
One of the things that's always in the back of my mind when Tony Ferguson is fighting is what kind of damage has been done to his body via his own training methods. He's 34 years old. He's coming off of knee surgery, and he still trains like a psychopath, to be quite honest with you. And I don't mean a psychopath as in he trains hard. I mean, he trains very unusual. And I don't know necessarily how his body will respond following that type of a knee injury. Joe, you giving Pettis any room here?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, I'm wearing my Go Team Pettis Go shirt all night, right? Anthony's fantastic, but Ferguson wins this fight, in my opinion. I mean, Tony's just, despite the fact that he's missing a few screws whenever he trains, he operates on a different frequency. Let me tell you, I'm rooting for Pettis, but Ferguson wins this fight because I just think that he's on a different level right now. I do get what James was saying about the Chiesa fight. Don't put too much stock in Showtime's win over Chiesa. I do put some stock into that victory, though. I put more stock into Chiesa breaking down. But Pettis, Pettis did what he had to do in that fight. I think if Pettis believes and is telling us the truth about him going back to what he was before, this is a perfect example to prove it again. Because if he takes out Tony Ferguson, man, there's going to be some flags being raised everywhere. Like, whoa, Pettis is back. Pettis is truly back. So huge opportunity for him. And like James said, not many people are giving him much of a chance. I've got my Go Team Pettis goal for sure.
Conor McGregor, Khabib Nurmagomedov, UFC 229 main event. Fightful.com, FightfulMMA.com have full live coverage of the show and discussion. Come over, make your predictions. Check out our live post show on YouTube and on Fightful.com, FightfulMMA.com. Let's break down the main event. Conor McGregor, a former double champion technically in the UFC, taking on the current champion, Khabib Nurmagomedov. Looking for a lot of things in this. Their strengths are each other's weaknesses. We've seen Khabib cracked by Michael Johnson, didn't get knocked off his feet, was stunned a little bit. I'm inclined to believe that with McGregor's reaction time, if he lands one shot like that that stuns Khabib, that he's going to land several more that follow. He's got a lot of his technical ability on the feet is really underrated because it's sometimes outshined by his loud, obnoxious personality. You see Khabib Nurmagomedov, who sometimes has to wade in order to get his takedowns. And that's the type of thing that a Conor McGregor loves. But he also loves when people try to set up their takedowns with strikes so he can counter them. McGregor is a very proficient counter striker. What do you think the end game will be, James, and who are you picking?
All the logic in the world tells me that Khabib's going to survive. He's going to end up using his grappling, wrestle Conor McGregor, win a decision, or win by late finish. But it's Conor McGregor. Like you mentioned, he can knock out anyone. I look at the Eddie Alvarez knockout, for example. You know, Eddie hadn't been knocked out in a fight since you had to go all the way back to Bodog when he lost to Nick Thompson in a fight where he was basically a welterweight fighting a middleweight in that title fight. That was ages ago. And, you know, Alvarez ended up, getting knocked out in that one. But to me, McGregor just knocks out guys that you just don't think will get knocked out. And we haven't seen Khabib really tested in that sense with some of the opponents. Now, that's not his fault. It's just some of the guys he's had to face. He hasn't really been cracked. I know he fought Michael Johnson. He got hit in that fight. But, I mean, Conor McGregor is just a completely different level. So my pick here is going to be McGregor. I really feel like if he has, especially in the early rounds, if he's able to connect, I think he can knock out anyone in the lightweight division. And I just think that Khabib, he's never faced a striker like that. Now, if Khabib gets the takedown and, gets Conor on the mat like Chad Mendes did, then we're talking about a different fight here. And we could see him control McGregor. But I don't know how you can bet against Conor McGregor. Just with what he's been able to do in the stand-up department. Anytime a guy's got knockout power like that, I think it's really tough to go against him. So I'm going McGregor. One more thing before I end my point here. There is 64 prop bets for this fight. Just to give you an example of some of the crazy prop bets, Nurmagomedov gets the most takedowns. Nurmagomedov, TKO in round 3. Like, you can literally pick to the round or the result. There's just some crazy bets here. So check that out if you guys are into betting the fights. I think there's a touch gloves one as well. So a lot of fun stuff for this fight. I'm looking forward to it. But yeah, my pick is going to be McGregor. Don't at me, guys.
I'm picking McGregor as well, and he is a plus 125 to Nurmagomedov's minus 155. That's one of my I got 5 on it. But let's talk about that Mendes fight, because a lot of people didn't think that McGregor would come out with kicks because that leads to takedowns, but he still does. He chops away, digs the toes into the body, works away at the cardio of his opponent. And while McGregor's cardio has been a question, Joe, you always have to question that with a Khabib Nurmagomedov, despite how overwhelming he is. You never know what the latest weight cut is going to do to him. You never know how his body's going to respond to the latest thing that he puts through it. And he does have some offensive tools on the feet. He has the eagle punch, they call it, that starts straight, goes up and around, and it breaks through the guard of a lot of people. But that is the type of punch that if you throw it, Conor McGregor might connect with you before you land. I mean, we saw Jose Aldo throw a strike that hit Conor McGregor, but Conor McGregor recognized it and was able to land first. What do you think the overwhelming technique is that sways this fight?
If Khabib can remain mentally strong heading into this fight, he wins this fight, in my opinion. It's only Tuesday. There's a whole lot of mental warfare that he's going to have to endure leading up to Saturday's fight. So if he can remain mentally strong, and it's not going to be easy, I think he wins this fight. I think he cuts the distance off. I think, Conor is Conor. Conor, I mean, any guy that goes 10 rounds with Floyd Mayweather is the best striker in the UFC. Hate to break it to most people. They may not like that analogy, but he's the best striker in the UFC. So Khabib should have no business whatsoever striking with Conor unless he can convince Conor he's in a striking fight, and then this fight goes down to the ground. control Conor, and then just beat him even until the round ends, beat him for a TKO or beat him for 3 of the 5 rounds. I think that's what's going to happen. The technique here is the distance, in my opinion. Whoever can control the distance and understand where you need to be to execute whatever technique you think is going to help you in the fight is going to be the difference here. If Khabib can close the distance while getting past that left hand, he's taking Conor down all night. If Conor can understand where he is in the cage and not be too close to the cage where he can't, move laterally or he can't sprawl, if he can keep that space, he's going to knock out Khabib. He's going to shock and awe Khabib until this fight's over.
As you mentioned, Joe, the range, Conor McGregor uses that and uses a plethora of tools, kicks, punches, straight punches especially, but those distance kicks where he pulls his body back from his opponent but throws the kicks outward to nail them down when they do come in. And he does it. He's gotten really good at making people circle away from his power and then attacking, because usually you want people coming in towards it. You bait people to come in towards it, but he has developed an offense where he can do that with people going away. And then when you get impatient with McGregor, he makes you pay. You take him down and you fail, he's probably going to slip and counter there too. That happens. Khabib, on the other hand, even when he fails a takedown, he puts the pressure right back on. You'll see him chase after people, even if he's not striking. He'll eat a couple just to put the pressure on. But that's a game that Conor McGregor sometimes likes unless he's exhausted. Then he doesn't necessarily like it. But we've seen Khabib literally chase people down with his hands down in order to keep the pressure on them. If Conor McGregor's cardio game isn't up to snuff, that's going to cause some issues. Now, there's the whole aspect of Conor McGregor getting dragged down to the ground. He is I think, a brown belt, technically.
Oh, he's got ground skills. He's got ground skills, but it is against a Khabib. It's a different story altogether.
Yeah, I don't think he's hitting X-guard sweeps like he did against Nate Diaz, who probably wanted down there anyway. And when Khabib takes people down, he waits for people to try to advance and defend, and then he throws shots. It's like he's racking up a score on a video game. Like every punch is a couple more points for him, then he'll submit people. It's very good, and we've seen him switch from the low single when it didn't work to the body lock and go there against Iaquinta. James, I think it's if this gets into clinch range, I would be shocked if Khabib doesn't take him down. But as we've seen, Abel Trujillo got up 15, 16 times. So it's not impossible to get up. Can Conor McGregor's ground skills lead to him getting up?
Possibly. We don't know. I mean, he's got really good coaching. He's, bringing different guys in. Who knows what he's been working on? I just know that this guy always comes to fight, in terms of coming with a great game plan. You got to put trust in the process. I think that he can surprise some people on the mat and, do what he has to do. I think no matter where this fight goes, Conor's going to be prepared, especially since he's had a lot of time for this fight too. I think this isn't like, switch up an opponent like with the Diaz fight when he's supposed to fight Rafael dos Anjos. I think Conor is the best prepared he can be heading into a fight like this.
We have a live post-show Saturday night after UFC 229. Make sure you all tune in. James will be in Las Vegas. Showdown Joe likely joining me as it seems. You all can follow him at Showdown Joe. Follow James at Lynch on Sports. Follow me at Sean Ross Sapp. But most importantly, visit Fightful.com and FightfulMMA.com. Got coverage all week. Another presser on Thursday. We will have it streaming at the site. Every episode of Embedded, Inside the Octagon, Countdown, all that good stuff. Head over to Fightful.com and check it out. Until next time, guys.